I came into the world January 2nd, 1924, born in Sitka, Alaska, at that time known as the Territory of Alaska, not becoming a state until 1959. I was named Anna, after my dad's sister. I was born with a deformity, and at the time, my parents, Adolf and Sophie Thompson, were starting their fox farming venture. They farmed on different islands around Sitka, none of which were suitable, as the foxes swam away to the other islands. They decided to lease Biorka Island from the U.S. government. It was 14 miles from Sitka. It would be our home for the next 11 years, raising blue foxes. But there was a more immediate need facing my parents. I needed surgery within 10 days of my birth. So, my mother, who barely spoke any English and unable to read or write, took me to Chicago. My parents were told there was a specialist there that could do the surgery that I needed. The trip to Chicago that winter was very bad. The trains were not heated very well, and Mom got ill with pneumonia. The doctor told her that a small glass of whiskey saved her life, breaking her very high fever. There were no antibiotics in those days. My surgery went well, and finally, we were on our way back home. When our steamer arrived in Sitka, Dad was there to pick us up with his fishing boat, and together again, our new family made the 4-hour trip back to Biorka Island. The island was truly becoming a farm. We acquired chickens, goats, a horse, sheep, cows, and more foxes. During the time we were gone, Dad had to fish to supply feed for the foxes, and it added some income. The sheep provided wool for our warm socks and sweaters. Mom would spin it into yarn from the sheep's wool she sheared and carded. I still have her Norwegian spinning wheel that produced the clothing that protected and comforted us. We had a big garden that gave us potatoes, beets, cabbage, carrots, lettuce, cauliflower, kale, and turnips, and all went into the root cellar for use in the winter. The chickens provided the eggs, the cows and goats gave us milk, which was churned and made into butter and cream. The horse was used for hauling the big sled on the beach, moving supplies and building materials when Dad brought them from Sitka. To build our house, Dad had to haul all the lumber and materials in his small boat. Dad also built structures called trap houses to protect and feed our many foxes. Our isolation was even greater in the winters. With no telephone and the fishing boats that anchored in Simon's Bay gone for the season, we were alone. Thankfully, we got good reception on our radio, and we welcomed the coming of each spring. Dad had to fish in the summers to make ends meet. That left Mom to run the farm, cooking a giant kettle of fox feed consisting of cereal and fish every day. Then, with 2 5-gallon pails, she would pack the feed on a wooden yoke across her shoulders for the miles-long haul to the trap houses. One day, when I was only about 8 years old, Dad had to go to Sitka to deliver our fox pelts. It was a very stormy February. In order to catch the fur buyer, Dad had no choice but to set out in his small rowboat. Having made it to Sitka, the weather worsened, delaying Dad's return for nearly a month. Mom believed his boat had sunk, and we would never see him again. But one day in early spring, emerging from the woods on her return from a deer hunting trip, she was surprised to be greeted by Dad and his new camera. The photo forever captures that happy day, even though Mom, with a large deer slung over her back, might not look as happy as she must have felt. She told Dad that she had to go hunting because we were getting low on food. You don't go running to the store where we lived. With no knife to remove the head and being barely 5 feet tall, she had to lift the entire deer onto a tree stump and then onto her shoulders for the 3-mile trek home, carrying it and her gun. That deer provided 3 cases of venison. It wasn't the only time Mom took it upon herself to save her family. After another trip to Sitka and a meal in a restaurant there, Dad became dangerously ill with food poisoning. Mom took the big skiff, launching it by herself on the rollers to high water, then rowing out for help from a trawler that happened to be anchored in the bay. As time went on, Dad needed a bigger fishing boat. So, doing things the way we did back then, he built one. He named it Sophia, after Mom. I think it was a 42-footer, a beautiful boat it was. It was hard to get materials for the boat, having to haul it all from Sitka. But the bow stem was a little closer to home. Dad spotted a tree that was just the right shape. The keel was also local wood, cedar from Goddard Hot Springs. Mom did all of the caulking on the Sophia. When the day came to launch it along the rollers across the beach to the water, it didn't leak a drop. We were all very proud of Mom. When we moved off the island years later, the Sophia's hull was loaded with as many of our belongings as it could hold to take to Sitka. At that time, Dad had not yet built its cabin. That had to be done in Sitka. But that was still to come, and our Biorka family was growing. I was joined by my sister, Florence, and my brother, Jurgen. I was 7 years older than my little sister, and I welcomed the company. I got lonely at times, inventing games and playing alone with my wooden boat in the pond. I had acquired a pet fox, a calf, and a pet chicken that followed me around. Once I put him on a rock when the tide was coming in. He had to wait for the water to go out. We didn't have a dog because it would run off the foxes. It was around this time when Mom and Dad decided it was time for me to go to school. Among the neighboring islands, there were 4 fox farming families, including ours. We set up a 1-room schoolhouse at Goddard Hot Springs, named for a Dr. Goddard who lived there at the time. There was the C.J. Mills family of 6 children, the Huff family of 1 child, and the Chris Jackson family of 3 children and myself. All different ages. What a group we were. The poor teacher. Being that the weather was so bad in winter, and you had to go by boat, we went to school for 3 months in the summer. There were many times Mom did not know where I stayed overnight, not being able to make it home due to weather. We were on the outside island, and further away from the neighboring islands of Maid, Legma, and Tava. Many a time I had to row out to the boat that took turns, as you might say, as our school bus. Once it was so rough, Dad put me in a canvas bag tied around my waist so that if the boat sank, I would float, which did happen once. It didn't bother me because I didn't have to go to school that day. We had a very big surf on that beach. I had to row out and anchor my skiff so that I would get back to the beach when I came home. We had no dock there because the surf was so bad, even in summer. After school was chore time. It was my job to fill the big wood box in the kitchen for the large wood stove and to clean the glass chimneys of the kerosene lamps that provided our light. We got our water from a tureen which collected the rain runoff from the roof of our house. Dad carved a bathtub from a cedar log. We thought that was great, and it worked well. Every day, Dad would make me practice the old Palmer method of making or writing my capital in small letters, which I found helpful in my later school days. Then came the day when Dad converted an old Ford engine into a light plant. On Christmas morning, the neighbors came over, and we turned our electric lights on. What a day that was! I also got a doll from the store. What a treasure she was. Later, when I took it out on the beach, a fox took it away and I never saw it again. I guess she took it to her den for her pups to play with. I suspected my pet fox Mickey got it. We had a boat chartered in the winter to bring supplies out when Dad couldn't do it. I remember the day when Rudy Sarvella, the captain, gave me a pack of Wrigley's chewing gum. I never saw gum before, and I really treasured that. That Christmas, Mom and Dad bought a 10-pound pail of candy from Sears. They thought they had it hid, but I found it, and I ate it all. Needless to say, I wasn't eating too well and lost weight, so they took me to the doctor in Sitka, and he told Mom and Dad that I ate too much candy. I got into trouble when they found the empty pail. Sometimes for a playmate, Dad would go into town and bring me a friend who I still treasure today, my friend, Irene Peterson Wittick. We had many a good time together. Irene and I made mud pies using the goat's milk. Mom always wondered why the goats went dry. At other times, I would go to town with Mom and Dad and get a treat of an ice cream cone from the soda fountain at Wortman's drugstore. What a treat that was, as I never saw an ice cream cone before. I was given some balloons and a dress from a very nice lady that owned a dress shop there. Bless that nice elderly lady, Mrs. George Peterson of the Sitka Bazaar. I will never forget those people. I was only 6 or 7 at the time, and the store is still in business, run by her grandchildren. Years went by. I believe I went 3 summers of schooling on the island. Mom and Dad sent me to Sitka to attend school for 1 season, at which time I stayed with the James Brightman family. I think this was 1933. This way, I didn't miss much school. By that time, the price of fox pelts went down. I think the year was 1934 or 35. Times were very bad, so my parents decided it was time to quit the farm and go to Sitka. I felt sad about leaving the island and about being with strange people and children when I went to Sitka. We packed all our belongings, or as much as the Sophia could hold, for our move to the city. Before we set out, I ran one more time to my favorite lookout point on the island, where I picked the pretty blue bell that grew in the rocks there, and I bid farewell to Biorka.
Sure, I wouldn't mind having a boat like this going out the boat every morning.
Which way is the best way up? I think over this way, Grandma.
So then they went down Nice looking boat. I always liked it.
Yeah.
It had a guard strip that was natural. And, you know, gosh, you've changed since I've been here. All this was all open, was fresh with me. It wasn't. This side was better.
Yeah.
On the weather side, it all blew in there. He was getting some water from somewhere, so I don't know how he got his water. I suppose he had a tears.